Hello, my name is Jerry Rideout. Today I'm going to be reading from my book of short stories called My Life in Short Form. It's a book about growing up in Newfoundland back in the 1950s and 1960s. My little hometown was called Kings Point, and I lived there for the early part of my life. I didn't see any beauty. I just wanted to leave, and of course ran away to the big city. Now when I go back, I see it for what it is, a heaven on earth. Around Christmas time in 2014, I published a story on a Facebook site hosted by my hometown of Kings Point. I got such positive feedback that I decided I'd write another, and that led to a third. And then I made a silly promise that I would put a story up on the Facebook site every week for a full year. With a lot of encouragement, I finished my 52nd story around Christmas time 2015. So what I'd like to do in this book, and I hope I've accomplished that, is relive along with you what life was like in a small town back in the 1950s and 1960s. I hope you enjoy the stories. Thank you. This first story is called Food and Conversation, The True Joys of Life. When I was a young boy, our table at mealtime was always full. On Sundays, the dining situation could even get a little out of hand. I was blessed with 5 older sisters, most of whom had moved out, were married with children, and living in their own residences. On Sunday afternoon, they all showed up, replete with husbands and a slew of kids. All of my beautiful sisters were born into this world before Dad and Mom had any of their sons. Then our parents produced 5 sons in a row with no daughters in between. I worked it out a while back, and the chances of that happening are 0.000095%. I guess that makes us a miracle family. Sunday was always a big day at the Rideout Mansion. My parents, my 4 brothers, my sister Joyce were permanent residents of the house. Marion and her husband, Art, along with their brood, brought a few more bodies to the table. Alberta Stewart and their crowd added another slew, while Georgina and Wiley added another couple. Audrey and Clarence piled on with another few appetites. Last but not least, my sister Joyce would invite her boyfriend, Elwin, which brought the total dinner setting to somewhere in the range of 20 to 25 people. If my sisters were reading this and are thinking I have the numbers wrong, remember, you weren't completely finished building your families at that time. The meal was more like a church social than a family dinner. I don't know how we sat everyone, but I do remember being regulated to a series of smaller tables scattered throughout the house. I envied the grown-ups at the large table. Their cups and saucers always matched the plates, and I realized very early that we were quite low on the familial totem pole. I really don't know how our mother managed it, but I remember an assortment of cold meats, potato salads, beets, and the Jell-O with Nestle's cream. Of course, any dinner also included Mom's homemade bread. My God, Mom's bread was amazing. Freshly baked, what seemed like every other day. She greased her pans using a butter-soaked clump of bread dough before tucking that little treasure into the corner of one of the bread pans to be baked along with the batch. My brothers and I would make a mad dash to the counter when the loaves emerged from the oven and were dumped from the pans. That little butter-soaked clump turned into a crispy brown delight that could be easily separated from its mothership loaf. The first kid to arrive always got the prize. On those Sundays, though, I mostly remember the decibel level of the adults talking and laughing, of the youngsters yelling and fighting, and of the deafening sound of silence after everyone went back to their own homes. On the Sabbath, our dinner guests were always family. During the rest of the week, though, any time we sat down to eat, there may have been some non-relative chowing down on a piece of mousse or rhubarb pie. A regular moocher was a kid named Carl. I know for a fact that he was not an abandoned child, but he was a regular fixture at our table. It really didn't matter who the guests were, If they were anywhere near our house come mealtime, they would be sitting across from me at the table. What I remember most vividly about Dad was his proclivity to pick up strays. Not dogs or cats, stray humans. If he returned from being out of town for any type of business, a trip to Grand Falls or taking a load of lumber to Springdale, it was quite common for a new friend to be in tow. That's how we met Patrick. After all these years, I don't remember his last name. I was about 10 years old when I first sat down at lunch next to Dad's newest cause. It didn't take long before I realized he was blind, making his living traveling around rural Newfoundland selling trinkets. Patrick's skill was making specially designed leather belts, and he could put one together in just a few minutes. They were made from little figure-8-shaped pieces of leather folded into one another. When the belt was long enough to fit his client's waist, he would attach a buckle and a tongue containing the holes. I don't know if they were gifts to repay my family's generosity or if Dad bought them for us, but my brothers and I were soon sporting Patrick's wares around our waists. I do remember that the belts were perfect for holding the little plastic bullets from my gun and holster set. Patrick walked all around Kings Point peddling his products, and at mealtime he would regale us with stories of his adventures on the road. Our house, like all others in Kings Point in those days, was Protestant. If you wanted to practice another religion, you had to drive to St. Patrick's about an hour away. When Dad asked Patrick if he wanted to say grace before his meal, he did something I hadn't seen before. He made the sign of the cross over his heart. He was one of that strange breed I'd heard about, a Catholic. After he gave thanks to his Maker, my father started eating his meal. Patrick then asked my father, "Are you Catholic then?" Dad's reply was quick and resounding, "Nope." Patrick's next question was, "Don't you say grace before a meal?" I always remember Dad's reply, "Of course we do, Pat, but I thought you just said grace." It was then and there that I gained new insight into how, no matter how different we appear to be, we're all the same inside. Patrick came a few more times before we lost contact with him, but each time he showed up, I would sit enthralled, lost inside his stories. When Don and I had our own family, we always made a point of having everyone sit at the table during mealtimes. Eating alone in front of the television or in a different room was not an option for our kids. I believe that meals are not only meant for eating, but also for conversation. That Sunday chatter around our table was the highlight of my young life. I learned from Dad, Mom, Patrick, and all the other stragglers who ended up at our table that breaking bread with a stranger is one of the greatest rewards of the planet. Thank you.